Keep talking.
That lick D-Mac hit, that wasn't no card game. That was your nephew. Supposed to be their way of serving them up to King Kilo without their fingerprints being on it.
Now today we're going to be talking about Tommy versus CBI, him being kicked out, but more from a Jenard and Diamond storyline perspective. We're going to be getting into the fight between Tommy and Diamond, the build up, what led up to this moment, but what happens next? What happens now that Tommy's been kicked out of CBI? What happens from a CBI standpoint? Because I do think we can make a very good case where, without Tommy, this empire will definitely start to crumble. Jenard is now back on the drugs, and Diamond is also back on the drink. So we're also going to be taking a look at the old Diamond, which we've heard a lot about since season 1, and how that will also contribute towards their downfall. And generally, how does it end for both Jenard and Diamond? Prison, death, or does a character like Jenard even face a life worse than death? If you're thinking, how can you get worse than death or jail? Well, I do think we need to remember what happened to characters like Franklin Saint and Lamar from BMF, becoming drug addicts or alcohol addicts and ending up on the streets. Honestly, there's so much to unpack, so much to talk about. There's also Jenard potentially killing a few characters, this funeral scene, will that be a red funeral as well? We've also got Tommy and Miguel teaming up to take on the CBI, and come the end, can Tommy take back the coalition? Can he somehow find a way, or will CBI be the reason why he has no choice but to call Tariq? There really are so many chess pieces to consider going into the home stretch for all things CBI in Power Book 4 Force Season 3. Now we always knew this was coming. We could sense it was brewing ever since episode 1, and you can even say season 2. The fallout began way back in season 2, and it was just a ticking time bomb ever since, because that's how long both of them have been keeping secrets. Jenard being a dope fiend back in season 2, Diamond calling the hit on D-Mac and sending them into an ambush with the 9/7s back in episode 3, that was always definitely going to come back around. Over the past few weeks and since the start of the season, we've done one Tommy vs Diamond breakdown and one Tommy vs Jenard breakdown. After episode 1, we spoke about how the betrayal where Diamond called the hit on D-Mac pretty much set up Tommy vs Diamond at some point this season. Well, we had to wait until episode 7, but he finally found out thanks to Shanti, who I don't think was manipulating Tommy in any way in episode 7, because she never really had no real reason to. Her previous reasons was to break the top of CBI's hierarchy and get rid of them so she could take over CBI. But now that Jenard and Diamond have strengthened their brotherhood, that can't happen. I just think Shanti was really angry, pissed off, she felt betrayed by Jenard, so she thought, let the cat out the bag, watch your back when it comes to these brothers, because they be making moves that you don't even know about. And that led to this moment, Tommy versus Diamond, and honestly it was a crazy scene.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
Now, all jokes aside, we had a lot of people wanting to talk about this particular moment where Tommy seemed like he was running, which I personally don't think he was running. He's someone who's never shied away from a fight, whether it's 10-on-1 like we saw with the Serbs back in Power, or whether it's against guys who are the size of Diamond. I'm sure we're going to see it in Power Origins as well, where he gets into quite a fair few fights. Some guys are probably going to be a lot bigger than he is, and he's probably going to get his ass handed to him. But one thing about Tommy is, he never backs down. I do think with the size difference in this fight, he probably maybe wanted to put a bit of distance between him and Diamond, because Diamond was definitely throwing him around like a bit of a ragdoll. He's a huge guy, and let's not forget, Diamond is a former boxing champ as well. The right thing would probably have been to maybe put a bit of distance between them and then work your way around. Keep moving around the ring, keep working Diamond. Unfortunately, it wasn't a boxing ring. It was Diamond's barbershop basement. It was more of a TLC match. Tommy definitely took a lot of hits, and you can even see it in the battle scars around his neck and his shoulder area in the trailer for episode 8. You've got all these bruises. So it was a crazy insane fight, but I don't think Tommy was running. But moving forward, it did also end up with Diamond kicking Tommy out of CBI, which in my breakdown I mentioned wasn't just Diamond talking, it was a mixture of Jenard and Diamond's frustration. Jenard has constantly been whispering in his ear about Tommy being an outsider, all these bodies dropping because of Tommy, which definitely is a valid point, but it's been constantly Tommy this, Tommy that, we don't need Tommy to make decisions as the head of CBI, why is an outsider making all these decisions, these were our guns. The old Diamond would never have let that happen, and just keep that statement around the old Diamond in the back of your minds. We are going to come back to that in the next chapter of this breakdown. But after episode 2, we also then went through Tommy versus Jenard, and how Tommy would lose this battle. Gary Lennon set up quite a few triangles for this final season of Force, and he mentioned one person would lose out in each triangle, hence the triangles in some of these thumbnails. Again, we had to wait until episode 7 with this one as well, but Tommy finally lost. In this triangle in particular, It's not always the case, but in this particular triangle, blood was thicker than water, because that's the theme that they've been going for this final season of Force. Now this means going forward, we know that Tommy's going to be a lone wolf. There will also be a tear and a split straight down the middle of CBI, because none of this sticks and stays together without Tommy. Again, we went through how Raheem is very loyal to Shanti. Could that still be a way for Shanti and Tommy to maybe potentially break the CBI from the inside? That definitely is something to keep in mind. D-Mac and Marshall will also most likely be Team Tommy, because if Marshall is really D-Mac's boy, then he won't be happy that Jenard and Diamond tried to set him up with the 9/7s, because he would have also then been caught up in the mess as collateral damage. So maybe Marshall goes over to Team Tommy, or at least I'd like to think he would. There's also this scene that we haven't seen with them pointing guns at each other and them pouring a drink for a fallen soldier. So things are definitely going to start to reach boiling point within CBI now that Tommy's no longer at the top of the hierarchy. Tensions will rise and things will definitely break inside 1 or 2 episodes. Whether it's caused by an inside man like Raheem with Tommy and Shanti being behind it, or whether it's just Jenard and Diamond who make bad decisions, CBI will definitely break. Tommy did even tell Diamond in episode 7, he needs him, he's the coalition, he's the reason why CBI are where they are. Go ahead and run the fentanyl for the Chinese, make your 9 times or 10 times more the profit than you make from the product from Che. It's a short-term run. Like Miguel said back in episode 6, sometimes slow and steady does win the race. There's no need to fix something that isn't broke. I even gave the example last week of how Walter Flynn had the right idea, he stuck to what works, he just had the wrong execution and was way too stuck in his old ways and just couldn't let go of the past. I was questioning, why are they moving away from something that works? We spoke about human greed after episode 6, and now after episode 7, I think we can add Diamond's reckless nature as well. Again, we are going to come back to that in just a moment, but Tommy leaving CBI will definitely cause a tear and a split within CBI, and they'll definitely end up destroying everything that they've built. Everything that Tommy and Diamond have built, majority Tommy by the way, he's the one who made all of this possible. All of this will now be gone inside 1 episode or 2, max. I don't think Tommy even needs to do anything in the background, they'll end up destroying it themselves. Whether Tommy and Shanti use a way in like Raheem or not, let's be real. Honestly, Jenard isn't fit to be a leader, he's back on the dope, he's a liability, which we will talk about in just a moment as well. And with Diamond, to be quite frank, Diamond is very reckless. So with that being said, let's talk about the old Diamond.
The old Diamond would have popped this goofy ass by now.
Now back in season 1, we all heard Jenard mention the old Diamond would never have let an outsider in Tommy come in and run the way he was in Chicago. The old Diamond would have popped him by now. We also heard how he was the cause of a lot of death in the streets because of a bad batch of product, that's why he was inside for 15 years. Now since Diamond has been out, he's only shown us glimpses of the old Diamond. He said he wanted to do things different, not be someone else, but do things different. But there were certainly glimpses, signs and moments. For example, killing Jamal, killing his PO, the look in the mirror, the blood, him not being able to change who he is, him drinking at the back end of season 2. Ever so slowly we were beginning to see the shades of the old Diamond, and based on what we're now seeing in season 3, honestly the old Diamond is pretty reckless to say the least. You can see why Diamond ended up in prison in the first instance. He's reckless, he's drinking again, he's letting Jenard get into his head, he's turned power hungry, all he cares about is making stacks of cash, and he doesn't even care who gets caught or hurt in the process. Whether that be serving up characters like D-Mac, who only happens to be his partner's nephew, or bodies that drop in the street because of fentanyl, product that they're now moving for the Chinese. He had this conversation with Kendra, who was very hesitant to run this product through the prison system. With Che's product, no problem, because that's standard. But this could have so many consequences for everyone involved. Now Diamond's response was, he just simply doesn't care. All he cares about is the money and power. And what did we say last week post episode 406? Money, power and greed can sometimes be the worst drug out of them all. You also have him drinking again as well, he clearly isn't in control, and I do think this is the old Diamond. This is why he ended up in prison in the first place, because he was reckless. Which is why I wouldn't be surprised if he does end up in prison again. Now this actually first sprung to mind when I was replying to a couple of comments, and one of the regulars Codin wrote, what if it ends how it started? I had a theory before that Diamond goes back to jail and Chicago goes back to the way it was before Tommy. Maybe the city wins and he leaves. And honestly, if you do take it back to season 1, it does actually kind of make sense.
Well, Lord knows the next time I see you.
Better not be no next time, D. You don't ever look back.
Diamond's story coming full circle, him ending up back in jail, where one of the old prisoners mentioned he never wants to see him again, but he does. And when he is back inside, maybe Rojas and his people deal with him. Maybe that's a fitting end to a reckless player like Diamond. because the way he's acting and behaving at this moment in time, honestly, it's hard not to see one of these kills or reckless moments not come back and haunt him. Whether it be his PO kill from season 2, Jamal, a kill from season 3, or maybe the move with the fentanyl backfires. I often say history doesn't repeat, but it sure does rhyme. Maybe we see a lot of bodies drop in the streets and Diamond gets done. Or maybe even Tommy sets up Diamond with the murder weapon he used to kill Stacey Marks, and then let Rojas' people have at him while he's in prison. And shout out to JMO Reviews who also played Rojas back in season 1, but that definitely is just a thought around Diamond. Diamond's story coming full circle, and Rojas and his people finishing the job in prison, him ending up right where he started, which has never actually been done before in Power. Now it does also have to be said there is a current alliance with Rojas in prison, but if CBI were to crumble, then that would definitely fall apart too. So let's talk about the end of CBI, and also an ending that would be worse than death for Jenard. What we saw from Tommy in episode 7 was a classic game of him playing chess and his enemies playing checkers. Tommy had Jenard on strings in episode 7. He overheard the conversation between Raheem and Jenard early on, and then he began to put his pieces into motion by having Jenard go to the Viagra Triangle clubs, have Shanti go as well, but a bit later on, where he'd be caught in the act with Jade. It was Tommy playing chess and Jenard playing checkers. Honestly, had him on strings. But going forward, what's a fate worse than death? It's this. What we saw play out with Franklin Saint and what we saw play out with Lamar in BMF, there are also many other characters, and it's also definitely happened to a lot of people in real life. Now, as much as I would love for this to happen, as much as I would love Jenard to receive a fate worse than death and him ending up on the side of the road where we saw Uncle Paulie's son, Jenard in the corner just looking to get his next fix because he's back on the drugs. You saw how he was tempted earlier on in the season as well, but I do think with what we're about to see play out in episode 8, just has to end with his death. I do think he does kill JP. I do think he also kills King Kilo in this scene as well. If any of you guys haven't seen my trailer breakdown, I do run through both of these scenes in a lot more detail. But then he'll definitely be targeting Tommy at the funeral and probably hit someone else, maybe even Maria. And that will pretty much seal and confirm his death. There is no way he survives killing JP anyway, and hitting someone at the funeral, especially if it is Maria. The reason why I do say Maria is because we still also have to yet see Miguel Garcia and Tommy team up, where they come bursting into the church taking out the CBI. They will definitely make the CBI for what they do in episode 8 and also most likely at the funeral, I have no doubt. Again, it would be quite cool to see something different and a different ending to someone like Jenard. For example, him turning into a dope fiend and ending up on the streets. I just think if he does kill JP, if he turns this into a red funeral that brings Miguel and Tommy closer together, then it's pretty much game over. It really is a wrap for Jenard. He has to go before the season is out. Jenard dies and Diamond goes back to prison where Rojas' people can deal with Diamond. That's where I am with the situation at this moment in time, but as I mentioned before, there are so many different ways and directions they can take this in. I do think it's very hard to predict what comes next, just like Jenard is going to be a very unpredictable character going forward, now that he's back on drugs. And I think that's something we do have to keep in mind. He's going to be absolutely high off his face, so where we speak about Diamond not being 100%, him not being in control, neither will Jenard. And that's what will also contribute towards not just the fall of CBI's empire, but also the downfall of both brothers. Jenard's addiction won't just amplify his flaws, it's gonna turn him into a liability. We also saw how he wasn't fit for purpose back in season 2, he couldn't run his organization, he wasn't able to lead, and it all quickly spiraled out of control, which ended up with him becoming a drug addict. So what do you think will happen when we see the downfall of CBI? Same thing can be said about Diamond. He's drinking as well, both of them are liabilities at this moment in time, and that's why the CBI are doomed. That's how the entire house of cards will tumble. Now, can Tommy potentially maybe take back the coalition before the empire crumbles? Maybe that's why he's come to see Che, to see how he can potentially make this happen. Maybe the new coalition is him, Shanti, and Miguel Garcia. They've still got the Viagra Triangle clubs. Maybe he joins forces with the Insane Princes, taking advantage of the dope fiend and someone who's a reckless and a drunk. As I mentioned before, Tommy doesn't even need to do anything. With Jenard back on drugs and Diamond behaving reckless, they're going to destroy everything themselves. It's just whether Tommy, Shanti, and Miguel can kind of swoop in and save the coalition, save the empire, and take it back before they destroy it for good. I personally do think CBI will cease to exist in Chicago after Season 3. Jenard will die, Diamond will also die or go to prison. It definitely is over for them either way. The question is, can Tommy take it back before they destroy it? And if he does, how does he do it? That's something we'll definitely unpack in a bit more of a Tommy focus breakdown, but that's a wrap for where we are at this moment in time with Tommy versus CBI. From more of a CBI perspective this time around compared to Tommy's perspective, as always, this always does come back around to Tommy. So can he find a way to take this coalition back before they destroy it? And how do you guys see the stories ending for Jenard and Diamond? I would love to see Jenard have a fate worse than death, but I do think the events that we are about to see unfold in episode 8, it definitely is a wrap. Although with Diamond, history may not repeat, but it can certainly rhyme. With that being said, the floor is now yours. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section, and as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.